Hi folks, this is Karim Raouf for IT Visualizer channel. We will continue our lab, the Matrix lab. This is the video number 58. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We are still working with the Purple Knight Active Directory Security Assessment tool, which is a free tool you can download and scan your Active Directory for security holes or security issues. Okay, we have stopped the last time at the test concerning the certificate or the certificate paths, dangerous control paths, exposed certificate templates. So this test is related to a group of tests named Active Directory Infrastructure Security Tests, which focus on your Active Directory infrastructure. One of these infrastructures are the certificate server, and another one can be DNS, another one can be anything that the Active Directory is built on. We all know that in this series we have discussed that Active Directory is built upon a couple or maybe four very famous things. One of them is the DNS, and one of them is the Kerberos protocol, and a couple of things. Please refer to my previous videos for more info. Anyway, so now we are discussing dangerous control paths, exposed certificate templates. So here he is seeking, or this test is looking for non-default principals. When we are talking about the principal, here we are referring to a user or a computer or a group, okay, which have the ability to write on a certificate template. Okay, so the certificate template, this is a blueprint, or this is some pre-configured settings that we use to create templates. Okay, this is what, or this is a definition of a template or certificate template. They are a group of pre-configured configurations or pre-configured settings that we use to create a certificate. Okay, so here he is seeking, or he is scanning if there is non-default principals, non-default groups or users or computers that have the ability to change a certificate template. So if you can modify a certificate template, you can play with the period it will last, or the expiry of this certificate, maybe the encryption used in certificate. A lot of things actually, you can play with the properties of a certificate template. So we are seeking, or we are seeing if there is any strange users or groups that have the right ability on a certificate template. Right here we are referring to modify the certificate template. Default or non-default, here we are talking about non let's say non normal users or groups. For example, we all know that the one that is authorized to change a certificate template is the domain admins or enterprise admins. So if you see, for example, any user or group that is not a domain admin or enterprise admin, then we are in a problem, because this is not the default principles. Okay, so we all know that the one that has the ability to modify a certificate template is the domain admin or enterprise admin. Okay, so for example, if we see, for example, accounting team or help desk team, okay, then we need to focus and see what they do exactly. For example, maybe you delegate for the help desk to uh, issue certificates, but not to change the properties of a certificate template. This is one thing we need to see, who has the ability to change a certificate template. If it is not a domain admin or enterprise admin, then we need to see who give this group or user the right to modify a certificate template, if it is a legitimate change or it is a hacker act. Okay, so let's see also the description here. Controlling certificate templates allow one to have the certificate authority issue an arbitrary certificate. It becomes possible to obtain a smart card authentication certificate for any user, thus stealing his identity. So for example, if you have the ability to change the certificate template for issuing smart card authentication, for example, then you can issue any certificate for any user. So this is one thing we need to focus on. So let's see how the AI tools explain this concept or this test. So if we see Perplexity, we can see here that he is giving us an explanation about this test. Let's read it loudly.
Non-default principles with write permissions on certificate templates. Understanding certificate templates. In an Active Directory AD environment like matrix.internal, certificate templates are predefined configurations that dictate how digital certificates are issued by the Active Directory Certificate Services, ADCS. These templates define various properties, such as key usage, e.g., encryption, authentication, validity period, enrollment permissions, who can request certificates based on the template. By default, only specific administrative roles should have the ability to modify these templates. However, if non-default principals, users or groups that are not part of the standard administrative roles, are granted write permissions on a certificate template, it poses significant security risks. Real-world example, matrix.internal. Imagine that in the matrix.internal domain, a certificate template called user authentication is configured to allow non-default principals, such as a group named helpdesk staff, to write properties on it. This misconfiguration could lead to severe consequences. Automatic certificate issuance. If manager approval is disabled for this template, any member of the helpdesk staff group can request a certificate without needing oversight. An attacker who compromises a helpdesk staff account can easily obtain a certificate. Arbitrary certificate creation. With write permissions on the template, an attacker could modify the template settings to create certificates that allow authentication for any user in the domain. For instance, they could issue a smart card authentication certificate for the domain admin account. Identity theft. By obtaining a smart card authentication certificate for a legitimate user, e.g., the domain admin, an attacker can impersonate that user and gain access to sensitive resources. This could allow them to perform actions as if they were that user, effectively stealing their identity. Likelihood of compromise. The likelihood of compromise is high when non-default principals have permission to write properties on certificate templates. Attackers can exploit these misconfigurations to escalate privileges and gain unauthorized access to critical systems within the organization. For example, if an attacker successfully issues themselves a certificate for the domain admin account, they can authenticate as that admin even if the actual admin changes their password. This persistence makes it extremely difficult to detect and remediate the breach. Mitigation and best practices. To prevent such vulnerabilities in matrix.internal, restrict permissions. Ensure that only trusted administrative roles, like domain admins or enterprise admins, have write permissions on certificate templates. Enable manager approval. Always require manager approval for certificate requests unless there is a compelling reason not to do so. Review template configurations regularly. Conduct periodic audits of all certificate templates to ensure compliance with security policies and best practices. Monitor for unauthorized changes. Implement logging and monitoring to detect any unauthorized changes to certificate templates or suspicious certificate requests. By following these practices, organizations can significantly reduce their risk of exploitation through misconfigured certificate templates in Active Directory environments like matrix.internal.
Very, very good answer. I can see that he has already illustrated the whole concept of the test. If we go and see the answer of ChatGPT o1, let's see the answer and see how he will explain this concept.
Understanding certificate template permissions in Active Directory. A real-world example with matrix.internal. Description. In your organization, matrix.internal Active Directory AD certificate services are utilized to issue digital certificates to users, computers, and services. These certificates are crucial for secure communication, authentication, and encryption within your network. The issuance and management of these certificates are governed by certificate templates, which define the settings, permissions, and policies for the certificates. An assessment was conducted to determine if any non-default principals, users or groups who are not default administrators or system accounts, have the ability to write properties on a certificate template within your AD environment. Having the ability to write properties on a certificate template means that a user can modify the template settings. This could include changing who can enroll for certificates, what the certificates can be used for, and other critical security configurations. Likelihood of compromise. If non-default principals have permissions to modify certificate templates, it poses a significant security risk for Matrix.internal. Issuing arbitrary certificates. Unauthorized users could alter certificate templates to lower security settings or grant themselves and others the ability to enroll for certificates they shouldn't have access to. Impersonation and identity theft. By controlling a certificate template, an attacker could issue a smart card authentication certificate for any user, including high-privilege accounts like domain administrators. This allows the attacker to authenticate as that user, effectively stealing their identity. Elevated access and lateral movement. With forged certificates, attackers can move laterally within the network, accessing sensitive systems and data they wouldn't normally have permissions for. Exploitation scenario. Imagine that within Matrix, that internal, regular user named Eve somehow has write permissions on a certificate template used for user authentication. Eve could modify the certificate template. She changes the template settings to remove the requirement for manager approval and allows enrollment for any user. Enroll for a certificate as a high-privilege user. Eve requests a certificate for a domain admin account. And because of the modified template, the request is automatically approved. Authenticate as the domain admin. Using the issued certificate, Eve now authenticates to services and systems as the domain admin, gaining full access to sensitive resources. This kind of attack could lead to a complete compromise of the Matrix.internal network, including data theft, disruption of services, and loss of trust in the organization's security measures. Result: the assessment found no evidence of exposure in Matrix.internal. This means that only default, trusted principals, such as domain admins and enterprise admins, have permissions to write properties on certificate templates. Non-default principals do not have the ability to modify certificate templates, reducing the risk of unauthorized certificate issuance and misuse. Remediation steps. No action is required at this time, since there are no non-default principals with write permissions on certificate templates. However, to maintain a strong security posture, it's recommended to regularly audit certificate template permissions, periodically review who has permissions to modify certificate templates, ensure that only necessary and trusted administrators have these permissions, implement the principle of least privilege, restrict permissions so that users and groups have only the minimum access necessary to perform their roles, monitor for changes, set up alerts and monitoring to notify you of any changes to certificate templates or their permissions, educate IT staff. Ensure that all administrators are aware of the risks associated with certificate template permissions and understand best practices for managing them. Conclusion. By ensuring that only default trusted principals have the ability to write properties on certificate templates, Matrix.internal mitigates the risk of unauthorized certificate issuance and identity theft within the network. Regular audits and adherence to security best practices help protect the organization's Active Directory environment from potential compromise. Additional note: if in future assessments any non-default principals are found to have write permissions on certificate templates, immediate steps should be taken. Revoke unauthorized permissions. Remove write permissions from any non-default principals on certificate templates. Investigate the cause. Determine how these permissions were granted and assess whether any malicious activity has occurred. Strengthen security policies. Update policies and access controls to prevent unauthorized changes. Review issued certificates. Check for any certificates that may have been issued under the modified templates and revoke them if necessary. By proactively managing permissions and maintaining vigilance, Matrix.internal can continue to safeguard its network and users from potential threats.
So maybe the answer is a little bit more easy to understand, but I think it's very, very long and repetitive somehow. I think this is an issue with ChatGPT o1. Its its answers are reasonable, okay, and it's thinking in logical steps, but I think he's repeating himself, even though the answer is very, very simple to understand, more simpler than perplexity. But anyway, this is a good thing for the AI to illustrate more and to be simple to explain. Let's go to Claude and see the answer of Claude concerning the same topic. If we go there and ask it to explain the same topic,
Remains secure and trustworthy. Copy. Retry. Let's break this down using a real-world example from Matrix Corporation, matrix.internal. Description. In Matrix Corp's Active Directory, certificate templates are like blueprints for creating digital ID cards. These digital ID cards, certificates, are used to verify the identity of users, computers, and services on the network. Normally, only specific system accounts, default principals, should have the ability to modify these blueprints. This indicator is checking if any unexpected accounts, non-default principals, have been given permission to write properties on these certificate templates. Likelihood of compromise. If an unauthorized account has the ability to modify certificate templates, it's a significant security risk. Here's a real-world analogy. Imagine Matrix Corp uses a sophisticated ID card system for physical and digital access. The certificate templates are like the master designs for these ID cards. If someone unauthorized gets the ability to change these designs, they could create a skeleton key ID card that opens all doors and accesses all systems. B. Design ID cards that look legitimate but have hidden privileges. C. Create ID cards that impersonate high-level executives or system administrators. In the digital realm, this translates to an attacker being able to create certificates that could impersonate any user in the Matrix Corp network, including high-level administrators. Bypass multi-factor authentication systems that rely on smart cards. Gain unauthorized access to sensitive systems and data. Result: the scan of Matrix.internal showed no evidence of exposure. This is good news from Matrix Corporation. It means that no unauthorized accounts have the ability to modify certificate templates. The blueprints for their digital ID cards are secure and can only be modified by the expected system accounts. Remediation steps. Since no issues were found, no action is needed. Matrix Corp's IT team has correctly configured the permissions for their certificate templates. Real-world impact. If unauthorized permissions were found on certificate templates, an attacker could create a golden ticket in the form of a certificate, allowing them to impersonate any user, including domain administrators. This could lead to a complete compromise of Matrix Corp's Active Directory environment, as the attacker could authenticate as any user they choose. The attacker could bypass traditional security measures, including multi-factor authentication, if it's based on smart card certificates. Detecting this type of attack would be extremely difficult, as the attacker would appear to be legitimate users to most security systems. The attacker could maintain persistent access to the network, even if other compromised accounts are discovered and closed. In the event of a security audit or incident response, this misconfiguration could have severe consequences for Matrix Corp, potentially including legal and regulatory issues. By maintaining proper permissions on certificate templates, Matrix Corp is protecting itself against a sophisticated and potentially catastrophic form of attack. Regular checks like this help ensure that the core infrastructure for identity and access management remains secure and trustworthy.
so now we have three different explanations. I think now the test or the objective of the test is very, very clear, and we have explained it in details. Let's see the next test, which is certificate templates that allow requesters to specify a subject alternative name. We have seen this or have discussed this part of the subject, part of this text before, subject alternative name. You remember that we have four options that if they are enabled on a certificate template, then this is an issue. One of them is the subject alternative name. So here is seeking or is scanning if a certificate template have the option to specify a subject alternative name. We have discussed this before. What is a subject alternative name? The indicator check certificate templates are enabling requests to specify a subject alternative name. I have discussed this option before. Subject alternative name, you are, for example, issuing a certificate for Karim. This is his name, and you can give him an alternative name. Maybe Karim, we have more shorter name, for example, KR. Okay, so this is used by a hacker, for example. If I issue a certificate by Karim, he can put alternative name as any other one, or he can put the domain admin as the alternative name. This is very, very dangerous. When certificate templates allow requests to specify a subject alternative name in the certificate security request, or certificate, I think this is certificates security request maybe. Okay, the result is that they can request a certificate as anyone. For example, a domain admin, when it is combined with an authentication EQ, or when this certificate is used for authentication, the certificate template become extremely dangerous. So I can put an alternative name, maybe the domain admin name, as the subject alternative name. So now I am having a certificate with the domain admin name, and it is used for authentication. So this is very, very dangerous, and we should not allow any certificate template to have or to enable on it to specify a subject alternative name. Okay, so this is very, very dangerous. Okay, let's go to the next test, which is computers with older OS version. This will test to see if you have older operating systems that are not supported anymore through Microsoft support team. For example, we all know that Windows XP is expired. We all know that Windows 7 is expired. Windows 2008 is expired. And today, or from a couple of months, maybe I think the previous year, okay, that 2023, that Windows Server 2012 R2 is expired as well. So he's seeking, or he's seeing that you are running versions of Windows older than Windows Server 2012 R2 and 8.1. So this is very, very good, because these computers or operating system are not supported anymore. They don't have, or they are not patched with security patches. Okay, so this is a security hole. You should not use operating systems that are not supported anymore by Microsoft, especially they are not releasing security patches to secure their operating system. Okay, so this is one thing also that is very, very good to scan for. Then we can go to the next test, which is computers with password last set over 90 days. We all know that a user or Active Directory user has a password, and the computer in the Active Directory has a password. Okay, so the computer password should be changed every 30 days, and this is done automatically. Okay, so he's seeking, or he's seeing if you have any computer that his password is not changed every 30 days. Okay, so this can be an issue if you have, for example, one PC that is powered off for maybe more than 90 days, then his password will not be changed automatically. So this is one issue. I have already this, some users take a long vacation, and when they open their PC and try to log into the domain, they are not able to do that because the computer password is expired. We need to change it. Okay, so how we can solve this issue? You need to go to the computer object that the user is trying to access. Okay, for example, you see that a user is trying to access a PC called Karim. You need to go to the Active Directory and see the computer object named Karim, and right click and reset the computer password. Computer accounts should automatically rotate their password every 30 days, as they are prime targets for attackers. Objects that are not doing this should show evidence of tampering. Anyway, he has already scanned my Active Directory, and he have seen a lot of computers not changing their password for 90 days, because actually this is a test lab. I have only 3 virtual machines, and I opened them, but the rest are a decoration, or it's something just to fill the spaces. Okay, so I have already 72 computers that already are in the domain, but I didn't join them physically to the domain, and they are not working, so their password is not changed. So this is a normal thing, and we do not need to bother ourselves with it. But here he is giving us a good data. For example, the last password set was in a certain time, and we have 190 days we didn't change the password. Okay, so this is a good indicator also to check if you have maybe a PC that you didn't remove it from the domain. This is one thing. You have some PCs that you are planning to remove from the domain and you forgot to remove them. So you should, this is a weak point. You need to remove it from your network. Okay. Then he is having some redemption steps. Computers should change their password every 30 days. It should be investigated. Why did not do that? Here are some suggestions to prevent it in the future. Password rotation. For each affected PC, initialize a manual password rotation process. Ensure that the new passwords are strong and comply with the organization password policy. This is very, very simple. Right-click the computer and reset password. Automated password rotation. Implement an automated password rotation solution. This is already done automatically by the computer, okay? And the password also is set by the computer. So for example, Karim computer will change his password in the Active Directory automatically. Okay, so we don't need to do all of these things, or we can assign an application to check for the computer passwords to monitor them for any or to monitor if they didn't change their password in a certain amount of time, maybe more than 30 days, or use Purple Knight tool to check for something like that. The active column shows if the account was active in the past 45 days. So this is very, very simple test. And now we go to the domain controller's computer object. We need also to check if the domain controller computer object in the Active Directory has its password changed. This is also very, very critical. The indicator looks for domain controllers machine accounts whose passwords had not been reset in over 45 days. By default, machine accounts including DCs automatically reset their password. This is what I'm talking about. Machine accounts are automatically resetting their password every 30 days. We have seen this in the previous test. Any machine account with password older than that could indicate that a DC is no longer functioning in the domain. So if maybe the PC is not changing the password, maybe the DC itself is not there. So because the computer will update its password by communicating with the DC and updating the password on the computer object in the Active Directory. So the DC, if the DC is not available, then it will not change, or the computer will not change the password. Okay, a DC that is not updating its machine account password regularly could be easily taken over from an operational standpoint. It could also indicate a communication problem with the rest of the domain. So you need to focus on something like this. Maybe this is a depromoted domain and it's still in the network, maybe. Okay, so let's see the next test, which is dangerous trust attribute set. What is this? These are, if you're having a domain trust or a forest trust, it is checking for two features in this trust. Something called trust attribute cross organizational enable ticket grant ticket delegation, and trust attribute privilege identity management trust. These are two things that if they are enabled in the trust between a domain and a domain, or a forest and a forest, this could be a security issue. Okay, what are these and how the hacker can take advantage of these two things? We will see that through the explanation of Perplexity and Claude and ChatGPT. Let's see the answer and see what is these two things, or these two sets, or these two attributes.
Trust attributes and security risks in Active Directory. Overview of trust attributes. In an Active Directory environment like matrix.internal, trust relationships between domains are essential for resource access and management. Two specific attributes, trust underscore attribute underscore cross underscore organization for enable underscore delegation, and trust underscore attribute underscore trust, can significantly impact security if misconfigured. Trust underscore attribute underscore cross organization and enable underscore delegation. This attribute allows Kerberos tickets to be delegated across organizations. If enabled, it can lead to scenarios where an attacker with access to a remote domain can impersonate users or machines in the local domain. Trust underscore attribute underscore PIM underscore trust. This attribute is related to privileged identity management PIM and can also reduce the effectiveness of SID filtering, which is a security measure meant to prevent unauthorized access through SID history. Real-world example, matrix.internal. Imagine that the matrix.internal domain has established a trust relationship with another domain, remote.domain.com. If this trust has the trust underscore attribute underscore cross underscore organization underscore enable underscore delegation set, it means that any user from the remote domain can request a Kerberos ticket that allows them to access resources in matrix.internal. Scenario of compromise. Compromise of remote domain. An attacker gains control over a user account in the remote.domain.com domain. This could happen through phishing or exploiting vulnerabilities in that domain. Impersonation via delegation. With the TGT delegation enabled, the attacker can request a Kerberos ticket for any user in matrix.internal. For instance, they could impersonate an administrator account, like admin at matrix.internal. Access to resources. Using the impersonated ticket, the attacker can access sensitive resources within matrix.internal, such as file shares, databases, or even administrative tools. Privilege escalation. Once inside the matrix.internal environment, the attacker could escalate their privileges further by accessing other accounts or systems, potentially compromising the entire forest. Likelihood of compromise. The likelihood of compromise is high when these trust attributes are enabled without proper oversight. An attacker who has compromised a remote domain can effectively gain unrestricted access to resources in the local domain, leading to severe security breaches. Mitigation strategies. To mitigate these risks in matrix.internal, review trust configurations. Regularly audit all trust relationships to ensure that TGT delegation is only enabled when absolutely necessary and that it aligns with security policies. Enable SID filtering. Ensure that SID filtering is enabled for all trusts to prevent unauthorized SIDs from being accepted during authentication processes. Limit trust relationships. Minimize the number of external trusts and carefully manage which domains are trusted based on their security posture. Monitor for suspicious activity. Implement logging and monitoring solutions to detect unusual authentication requests or access patterns that may indicate an attack. By following these best practices, organizations can significantly reduce their risk of exploitation through insecure trust configurations in Active Directory environments like matrix.internal.
So this is a good answer, but again, we can illustrate more something like what is Kerberos ticket delegation and SID filtering in Active Directory. So he's saying that these two things, or there is two holes, or if there is two configuration enabled on these two things, this can lead to a hacking situation. What is Kerberos ticket delegation and what is the SID filtering? Okay, we can also have a small explanation concerning these two.
What is Kerberos ticket delegation in Active Directory? Kerberos ticket delegation is a feature in Active Directory that allows a service or application to impersonate a user and access resources on their behalf. When a user authenticates to a service, the service can obtain a Kerberos service ticket on behalf of the user and use it to access other services that the user has permissions to. This is useful when an application needs to access resources hosted on a different server on behalf of the authenticated user, without requiring the user's credentials. There are three main types of Kerberos delegation in Active Directory. Unconstrained delegation allows a service to impersonate the user to access any service on any machine. This is the riskiest type of delegation and can allow attackers to steal user tickets and impersonate them. Constrained delegation limits the services that a service can delegate to. The service can only impersonate the user to access the specified services. This is more secure than unconstrained delegation. Resource-based constrained delegation. Introduced in Windows Server 2012, This allows delegation permissions to be set on the target resource rather than the service account. This provides more granular control over delegation. What is SID filtering in Active Directory? SID filtering is a security mechanism in Active Directory that filters out security identifiers, SIDs, when a Kerberos ticket crosses a forest trust boundary. SIDs uniquely identify security principals like users, groups, and computers in Active Directory. When a user from one forest authenticates to a resource in another trusted forest, the user SIDs are included in the Kerberos ticket. SID filtering ensures that only the necessary SIDs are allowed to cross the trust boundary. It filters out SIDs from the user's home forest, SIDs from any other trusted forests, SIDs that are not part of the target forest. This prevents security principals from one forest from gaining unauthorized access to resources in another trusted forest by impersonating users or groups from the other forest. SID filtering is an important security mechanism for protecting Active Directory forests that have two-way trust between them. In summary, Kerberos delegation allows services to impersonate users, while SID filtering helps secure cross-forest authentication by filtering out unauthorized SIDs. Properly configuring delegation and leveraging SID filtering is important for securing Active Directory environments.
So this explanation of uh, Kerberos ticket delegation and SID filtering, we can now ask it to give us a real-world example in context if Active Directory for domain name, matrix or internal. So we need to know what is Kerberos ticket delegation SID filtering. We need two examples on how we can delegate a Kerberos ticket and how we can do SID filtering. We have seen also through Perplexity that if two options are enabled on these two features, the Kerberos ticket and the SID, this can lead to hacking. Kerberos ticket delegation is a feature. If it is enabled on Kerberos ticket, it will lead to hacking, and something called privilege identity management trust. If this is enabled on SID filtering, this will lead to hacking as well. So we need to see or to have an example or Kerberos ticket delegation when we should use Kerberos ticket delegation. What is the situation that we need to delegate a Kerberos ticket and also to use SID filtering. Let's see also a good example concerning these two topics.
Real-world example of Kerberos ticket delegation and SID filtering in Active Directory. In the context of a domain named matrix.internal, let's consider a scenario involving both Kerberos ticket delegation and SID filtering. Scenario overview. Matrix.internal is an organization that has a web application hosted on an IIS server. Let's call it webserver.matrix.internal. That needs to access a SQL Server database. Let's call it SQL Server.matrix.internal to retrieve user-specific data. The organization uses Active Directory for authentication and has implemented both Kerberos ticket delegation and SID filtering for enhanced security. Kerberos ticket delegation. Delegation configuration. The IIS server, webserver.matrix.internal, is configured for constrained delegation. This means it can impersonate users to access specific services, in this case, the SQL Server. The configuration is done in Active Directory users and computers by selecting the delegation type as trust this computer for delegation to specified services only and specifying SQL Server as an allowed service. User authentication. When a user logs into the web application, they authenticate using their Active Directory credentials. The IIS server receives a Kerberos ticket granting ticket, TGT, for the user. Accessing SQL Server. When the web application needs to access the SQL Server, it uses the user's TGT to request a service ticket from the Key Distribution Center, KDC, for SQL Server. The IIS server then uses this service ticket to access the database on behalf of the user, allowing seamless access to user-specific data without exposing database credentials. SID filtering. In this scenario, suppose matrix.internal has established a two-way forest trust with another domain called external.matrix.com. Trust configuration. To enhance security across this trust, SID filtering is enabled on the trust relationship. This ensures that only valid SIDs from matrix.internal are allowed to authenticate and access resources in external.matrix.com. User access across forests. If a user from matrix.internal attempts to access resources in external.matrix.com, their Kerberos ticket will include SIDs from their home domain. However, due to SID filtering, any SIDs that do not correspond to valid accounts or groups in the target domain will be filtered out. Security implications. This filtering prevents unauthorized access by ensuring that even if an attacker were to compromise an account in matrix.internal, they cannot use those credentials to gain unauthorized access to resources in external.matrix.com. Only SIDs explicitly allowed by the trust relationship will be honored. Conclusion. In summary, within the domain matrix.internal, Kerberos ticket delegation allows the IIS server to securely access SQL Server on behalf of users while maintaining their identity through constrained delegation. Meanwhile, SID filtering ensures that only appropriate security identifiers are recognized across trusted domains, enhancing overall security and preventing unauthorized access across forest boundaries. This combination of technologies helps maintain a secure and efficient A.
So here, something called Kerberos ticket delegation, we have seen an example. So how he's saying, Purple Knight is saying that we should not allow Kerberos ticket delegation, but in a scenario like a web server and SQL server, this is necessary. So we need to find a way to secure our web server and SQL server database, not through Kerberos ticket delegation or by using Kerberos or a type of a Kerberos ticket delegation from the three that we have seen previously. I think here he has already stated that we can have three types of Kerberos ticket delegation. If we go further, let me show you here the Kerberos ticket delegation. I think here he has already said three types of Kerberos ticket delegation. Here we can see, for example, that we have unconstrained delegation. Okay, we cannot use something like that. We can say constrained delegation, so this maybe will harden our Kerberos ticket delegation to have a constrained delegation, not to be opened for anyone. So we should not use unconstrained delegation. We can use constrained delegation or resource-based constrained delegation. I think this provides more general control over delegation. So I think maybe the best one. Let me ask a small question. Let's ask ChatGPT. I think we can do a simple question like this. What is the best type of Kerberos ticket, or what is the more restrictive type of ticket, grant ticket delegation? Okay. Let's ask it a very, very simple question. How or what is this? But I think it's okay. Let's go and ask it. If we can go there and take the new model. What is the most restrictive type of Kerberos delegation in Active Directory? Let's see that. Okay, so here is saying the most restrictive type is resource-based constrained delegation, introduced in Windows Server 2012 R2. This is the most restrictive one, by allowing resource services, the target service, to control which accounts can delegate it to, rather than relying on the setting configured on the account performing the delegation. This inversion of control means that only explicitly specified accounts can delegate to the resource, minimizing the attack surface and providing fine-grained key features of that control by the resource owner. So we can control who can access services on a remote server, okay, not from the service account itself, but from the server that have the services that we need to access on. So for example, let me try to first give it a small let's ask to explain. Let's try to explain it in a more simpler terms just to make sure we can comprehend. So this, if you need to secure our Kerberos ticket delegation, we should use the uh, most restrictive type of delegation, which is resource-based constraint delegation. Let's ask it to explain in layman's terms so we can explain it, or to be more simple to understand. So now here is explaining uh, the three types of delegation, which is very, very good, so you can compare between the three. So let's read the answer. I think it's a better one, so we can comprehend what will be the situation, why this is the most restrictive one. Let's read the answer.
Simple explanation. Think of a hotel with many rooms, services, and guests, users. Sometimes a guest might need someone else, like a hotel staff member, to access a room on their behalf. This is called delegation. In the hotel, 1. Unconstrained delegation. Any staff member can enter any room for any guest. This is risky because staff have too much access. 2. Constrained delegation. Staff can only enter specific rooms for guests, but the permissions are set by the staff themselves, not the room owners. 3. Resource-based constrained delegation. The room owners decide which staff members can enter their rooms on behalf of guests. This means only authorized staff can access specific rooms when needed, making it the most secure option. In computer terms, RBCD is like this third option. It allows the owners of services, like files or applications, to specify exactly who can access them on behalf of users. This tight control makes RBCD the most restrictive and secure type of Kerberos delegation in Active Directory.
So very, very good answer. Now we can know why this is the most restrictive one. So if we need to bypass or need to pass this issue, when we run this test using Purple Knight, we need to, I think, make the ground ticket delegation to be the resource, or to be the type that is resource-based constraint delegation. I think will be the most restrictive one. Okay, so this is the test, and we can see now that this is the explanation of Perplexity. If we need to see ChatGPT explanation concerning this topic, if we go there and try to read the answer,
Understanding trust attributes and security risks in Active Directory. A real-world example with matrix.internal. Description. In your organization, matrix.internal, Active Directory, AD, uses trust relationships to allow users in one domain to access resources in another. These trusts are essential for enabling collaboration across different domains within the same forest or with external domains. An assessment was conducted to identify any trust relationships in your AD environment that are configured with either of the following attributes. Trust underscore attributes for cross-underscore organization underscore delegation. Trust underscore attributes for trust. These attributes can introduce significant security risks. Kerberos ticket delegation across domains. The trust underscore attribute for cross underscore organization underscore delegation attribute allows Kerberos ticket granting tickets, TGTs, to be delegated across domain boundaries. This means that services in one domain can request services on behalf of a user from another domain. Reduced SID filtering protection. The trust underscore attribute underscore trust attribute can weaken security identifier. SID. Filtering, a security measure that prevents malicious users from escalating privileges by injecting unauthorized SIDs into authentication requests. Likelihood of compromise. If these trust attributes are enabled, they pose significant security risks for Matrix.internal. Cross-domain spoofing. An attacker who has compromised a remote, trusted domain can impersonate any user or machine in the local domain. This happens because the trust attributes allow credentials and identity information to be accepted without the usual protections. Privilege escalation. By spoofing users or machines, the attacker can escalate privileges, potentially gaining access to sensitive resources and administrative functions within Matrix.internal. Forest-wide compromise. Since AD forests rely on trust relationships, compromising one domain can lead to the compromise of the entire forest if these trust attributes are improperly configured. Exploitation scenario. Imagine that Matrix.internal has a trust relationship with an external domain called partner.external. Due to misconfiguration, the trust is set with trust_attribute_cross_organization for enable delegation. An attacker compromises a user account in partner.external. Using the delegated TGT, the attacker impersonates a user in Matrix.internal, crafts Kerberos tickets that appear to be from legitimate users within Matrix.internal, accesses sensitive resources, uses these forged tickets to access files, databases, and services that they shouldn't have access to, escalates privileges, targets administrative accounts, eventually gaining domain admin privileges in Matrix.internal, compromises the entire forest, manipulates directory services, creates backdoors, and exfiltrates data across the entire forest. This scenario demonstrates how improperly configured trust attributes can lead to a severe security breach. Result: the assessment found no evidence of exposure in Matrix.internal. None of your trust relationships are configured with trust_attribute_cross-organization delegation or trust_attribute for trust. Therefore, the risks associated with these trust attributes are not present in your environment. Remediation steps. No action is required at this time since there is no exposure. However, to maintain a strong security posture, consider the following best practices. Regularly audit trust relationships. Periodically review all trust relationships in your AD environment to ensure they are securely configured. Understand trust attributes. Ensure your IT team comprehends the implications of enabling attributes like trust_attribute or cross_organization for delegation and trust_attribute trust. Apply the principle of least privilege. Configure trust to grant only the minimal necessary access between domains. Enable SID filtering. Ensure that SID filtering is enabled on external trust to prevent attackers from injecting unauthorized SIDs and escalating privileges. Monitor for unusual activity. Implement monitoring and alerting for unusual authentication patterns or access attempts across domain boundaries. Conclusion. By ensuring that trust relationships are securely configured and risky attributes are not enabled, Matrix.internal protects itself from potential cross-domain attacks that could compromise the entire Active Directory forest. Regular assessments and adherence to security best practices help safeguard your organization against such threats. Additional note: if future assessments find any trust with trust_attribute_cross-organization enable delegation or trust_attribute_trust, immediate action should be taken. Reconfigure trusts. Remove these attributes from the trust relationships unless there is a specific, justified business need. Assess the necessity. Evaluate whether enabling these attributes is essential for operations and consider alternative solutions. Implement additional security measures. If such attributes must be enabled, apply compensating controls like enhanced monitoring and strict access controls. By proactively managing trust relationships and maintaining vigilance, Matrix.internal can continue to safeguard its network and users from potential threats.
Yeah, I think the answer is not that good anyway, but I think he has explained one attribute only, which is or the ticket delegation issue, or the ticket grant ticket delegation, or the Kerberos ticket grant ticket delegation, but he has missed the SID filtering. Anyway, so let's see Claude here, also the answer of Claude concerning this topic, and see if he can explain it better.
Start new chat. Start. Let's break this down using a real-world example from Matrix Corporation, matrix.internal. Description. Matrix Corp has established trust relationships with other organizations to allow for collaboration and resource sharing. In Active Directory terms, these are called trusts. The indicator is checking for two specific trust settings. A. Trust underscore attributors for cross-organization enabling delegation. B. Trust underscore attributors for trust. These settings are like special agreements between Matrix Corp and other organizations that can potentially weaken the security boundaries between them. Likelihood of compromise. If these trust settings are enabled, it creates a significant security risk. Let's use a real-world analogy to explain. Imagine Matrix Corp's network as a secure office building and the trusted organization's network as a neighboring building. Normal trust relationships are like having a secure door between the buildings that only allows pre-approved individuals to pass through after thorough identity checks. However, enabling these specific trust settings is like A. Trust underscore attribute underscore cross organization for enable underscore delegation. This is akin to allowing visitors from the neighboring building to freely move around Matrix Corp's building using their own building's access card without additional verification. B. Trust underscore attribute underscore PIM underscore trust. This is like reducing the scrutiny of the identity checks at the connecting door, potentially allowing people to enter with incomplete or questionable credentials. Result. The scan of Matrix.internal showed no evidence of exposure. This is excellent news for Matrix Corporation. It means they haven't set up any trusts with these risky settings. Remediation steps. Since no issues were found, no action is needed. Matrix Corp's IT team has correctly configured their trust relationships. Real-world impact. If these risky trust settings were found, an attacker who has compromised the trusted organization's network, the neighboring building in our analogy, could potentially access Matrix Corp's resources as if they were any user or machine within Matrix Corp. This could allow the attacker to access sensitive data they shouldn't have rights to, use Matrix Corp's internal services and resources, potentially escalate their privileges to gain administrative access. The attacker could move laterally through Matrix Corp's network, compromising more systems and potentially gaining control over the entire forest, the collection of all of Matrix Corp's interconnected networks and resources. Detection of this attack would be challenging because the attacker would appear as legitimate users from a trusted organization. In a worst-case scenario, this could lead to a complete compromise of Matrix Corp's IT infrastructure, potentially impacting business operations, data confidentiality, and the company's reputation. By avoiding these risky trust settings, Matrix Corp is maintaining strong security boundaries even when collaborating with other organizations. This helps protect against sophisticated attacks that could exploit trust relationships to gain unauthorized access. Regular checks like this ensure that inter-organizational collaborations don't inadvertently create security vulnerabilities. Copy. Retry. Krone. What is Kerberos ticket delegation and SID filtering? In Active Directory, Kerberos ticket delegation and SID filtering are both important concepts in Active Directory security. Let me explain each one. Kerberos ticket delegation. Kerberos is the primary authentication protocol used in Active Directory. Ticket delegation is a feature that allows a service to impersonate a user when accessing resources on that user's behalf. Kerberos ticket delegation flow. Click to open diagram. Here's how it works. A. A user authenticates to service A. B. Service A needs to access service B on behalf of the user. C. Service A requests a special ticket from the domain controller. D. The domain controller grants this ticket, allowing Service A to impersonate the user. E. Service A can now access Service B as if it were the original user. While useful for certain scenarios, like a web server accessing a database on behalf of a user, if misused, it can pose security risks. SID filtering. SID, security identifier. Filtering is a security feature in Active Directory that helps prevent privilege escalation across trust boundaries. Here's how it works. A. Every user, group, and computer in Active Directory has a unique SID. B. When a user from a trusted domain tries to access resources in the trusting domain, SID filtering checks the user's SID and group SIDs. C. It filters out any SIDs that are not from the trusted domain. D. This prevents attackers from creating users or groups in their domain with SIDs that match high-privilege accounts in the trusting domain. SID filtering process. Click to open diagram. In the context of the previous question about risky trust settings, enabling ticket delegation across organizational boundaries, trust_attributors for cross-organizationers for enabling for delegation, could allow an attacker who has compromised one organization to impersonate users in the trusted organization, potentially accessing sensitive resources. The PIM trust attribute, trust_attributors_trust, can weaken SID filtering protections. This could potentially allow an attacker to use carefully crafted SIDs to gain unauthorized privileges in the trusting domain. Both of these settings can significantly reduce the security boundaries between trusted organizations, which is why they're flagged as potential risks in Active Directory security assessments. Copy. Retry. Can you give me a real-world example in the context if Active Directory for a domain named matrix.internal? Certainly. Let's create a real-world scenario for Matrix Corporation, which uses the Active Directory domain matrix.internal. Scenario: Matrix Corporation and subsidiary integration. Start new chat. Matrix Corporation, matrix.internal, has recently acquired a smaller tech company, Subtech, which has its own Active Directory domain, subtech.local. The IT teams need to set up trust relationships to allow for resource sharing and collaboration between the two companies. Kerberos ticket delegation example. Matrix Corp has a web-based project management system that needs to access data from Subtech file servers on behalf of Matrix users. Matrix Corp Kerberos delegation scenario. Click to open diagram. In this scenario, a Matrix user accesses the project management system. The system needs to retrieve files from Subtech servers. It uses Kerberos delegation to access the Subtech file server as the Matrix user. The Subtech domain controller validates the delegated ticket. The file server provides the requested data, thinking it's directly serving the Matrix user. While this setup can be convenient, it also introduces risks. If an attacker compromises the Matrix project management system, they could potentially access Subtech's resources as any Matrix user. Start new chat. Start. SID filtering example. Matrix Corp wants to ensure that users from Subtech can't gain unauthorized privileges when accessing Matrix resources. Matrix Corp SID filtering scenario. Click to open diagram. Here's how SID filtering protects Matrix Corp. A Subtech user tries to access a Matrix Corp resource. The user's access token includes their Subtech user SID and group SIDs. The Matrix domain controller applies SID filtering. It allows the Subtech user SID and legitimate Subtech group SIDs. It filters out any SIDs that don't belong to the Subtech.local domain. This prevents a scenario where Subtech admins could create a group with the same SID as Matrix Corp's domain admins group, which could otherwise grant unintended privileges. Risky trust configuration example. If Matrix Corp's IT team mistakenly sets up the trust with the trust underscore attribute underscore cross underscore organization underscore enable for delegation flag, it could allow subtext services to impersonate Matrix users across the trust boundary. If an attacker compromises Subtech's infrastructure, they could potentially access Matrix Corp resources as any user, including high-privileged accounts. Similarly, if they enable trust underscore attribute for trust, it could weaken SID filtering between Matrix Corp and Subtech. This might allow carefully crafted SIDs from Subtech to be recognized in the Matrix Corp domain, potentially leading to privilege escalation. These scenarios underscore why Matrix Corp's IT team needs to be cautious when setting up trust relationships, even with their own subsidiary. Regular security audits, like the one described in the original question, help ensure that such risky configurations are not accidentally implemented, maintaining the security of the matrix.internal domain. Copy. Retry. Claude can make...
So this is a very, very good answer. We can see here that we have a lot of data discussed today. I think we have reached 1 hour and 5 minutes. So now we have a lot of tests already we have discussed today. In the upcoming video, we will talk about printer spooler service is enabled on domain controller. This is a very, very important service that should be disabled because it will allow a certain kind of attack to be performed on the DC. So hope this video is informative to you all, and thank you all for viewing us. Thank you so much.